Howdy, howdy. My name is Lily from Makecraft Game, and I have some more stats I wanted to talk about, so I decided to make another video. After the last video, the Eyrie were doing very well, and I was kind of curious how leaders and turmoils really kind of fit into how the Eyrie function. Now, I don't have the exact stats from the RootCon tournament, but I do have the data from the Root Winter tournament, so I figured I might as well explore that a little bit. Now, the Eyrie did not do as well in the Winter tournament as they did at RootCon. They only had a win rate of 26%, which is still pretty good in my opinion. So I'm going to just work with the data that I got and go from there. In this video, I'm going to go through the leaders first, and then I will kind of just do like an overview and talk a little bit about turmoiling versus winning. So stick around for that. Now, the first leader on our docket today is the Builder. Now, this is a fairly loved leader of the Eyrie in the community from what I've seen, but not so much a popular pick for actual gameplay. So, when we look at the Builder, in terms of rounds, they had 0 times as the first leader chosen. After Turmoil, they were picked once, and after the second Turmoil, they were picked twice. Now, one thing I wanted to look at is, so they were picked 3 times in total, but how many rounds did they actually play? Well, they played, again, 0 as the first leader, because they never picked that. They played 0.1 rounds as the second leader, and 1.1 rounds as the third leader. And you might be wondering, what does it mean to play 0.1 rounds? Well, I put that in as kind of like a placeholder if a leader was chosen, but it was never fully played. So you turmoil, you pick the new leader, and then the game ends before it comes back to your turn. That's what it means to play 0.1 rounds. You didn't really get played, but you didn't not get played either. I wanted to show it, but it's not really something I took too much into consideration. So Builder, not as popular. One thing I do want to note is that there were only 2 games where the Eyrie turmoiled twice. So after those 2 turmoils, they always picked the Builder. I guess it was just like a sign of, I'm already going out, I'm going to go out on my terms, which I kind of get. Second leader we're going to talk about is the Commander. Again, not the most popular of leaders. So the Commander was never chosen right off the bat to start the game. After the first turmoil, they were picked 5 times in total, and then they were never chosen as the third leader. In fact, nobody will be going forward. So not as many picks, but in terms of rounds, they played 21 rounds when chosen out of the 5 times. So that's about 4.25, 4-ish rounds a game that the Commander got to play. Honestly, I'm a little surprised the Commander's not more popular. I know that some of the other leader powers are more like flashy, like Charismatic. You've got like the 2 recruits, which recruiting is great. For Despot, you have another way of victory points, but Commander doing those extra hits, I always thought would be more interesting, but hasn't really proven to be the case. Now let's get into the Despot. So we're getting a little bit more of a popular pick. So 11 times the Despot was chosen out of the gate to be the leader, which, I personally have a very soft spot for the Despot. I mean, look at that face. So lovable. Well, so lovable. The most lovable. After the first turmoil, we were picked 5 times, and then nothing after the second. So we have 16 times in total that the Despot was played. In terms of rounds, we're looking at 67 rounds the first time, so about an average of 6 rounds played with the Despot, and then 5.1 rounds as the second leader, so not played as much. You get maybe a turn before the game ends, or in the case of the 0.1, not even. So now, because the Despot was chosen first, I actually could make a tree. So the Despot turmoiled 8 times. There were 8 times where when playing as the Despot, they turmoiled. For 4 of those times, 4 players chose Commander. The other 4 went to Charismatic. Out of the Charismatic games, 1 did Turmoil, and so we finally went to the Builder on that chain. This is pretty even split to see going from Despot to Commander or Charismatic. I'm not surprised. I feel like typically when you start as a Despot, you end up trying to pivot to a more battle-heavy strategy, and at that point, either you have a lot of recruits on the board, so you're looking for Commander, you're looking to fight more, or you're spread real thin and you are desperate for recruits, which is why you would go Charismatic. Speaking of Charismatic, our last leader to talk about is the Charismatic leader, one of the most popular. In fact, it was the most popular, being picked 27 times out of the gate. This is becoming a bit of a standard. Was picked 4 times as the second leader, which we just saw, and then none as the third. So yeah, very popular, very, I think the Charismatic is a very loved strategy at this point. And so they played 213 rounds in the tournament. The average game was about 7 to 8 rounds, so kind of matches up pretty well. 16 rounds with the second leader, and then 0 with the third. Again, because the Charismatic was picked off the gate, I can make a lovely tree. This is a little bit more interesting. So the Charismatic leader had 7 turmoils out of all the times they were played as the opening leader. 5 of which pivoted into Despot, 1 into Builder, and 1 into Commander. That one that went into Commander did Turmoil, and then they went to Builder as the last link of that chain. I found it interesting how we have the Charismatic pivoting into Despot. I'm wondering if that is basically just like we have a bunch of warriors and now we need to get more buildings out. And that's where that pivot came from. But very interesting. So looking at this kind of overall, and our poor little commander is covered up by me on the total count, so I'll just talk about it. So for the total times chosen, which is what I'm calling total count here, the Charismatic was picked 56% of the time. The Builder was picked 6% of the time. Despot was picked 29% of the time. And Commander was picked 9%, which is the one hidden above my head. Now, that's a bit like a pretty good spread. However, if you look at the total rounds used, which is actually that way, you'll see Builder was basically non-existent with like it's like a 0.06 percentage or something. So effectively 0%. Charismatic dominated, being played 71% of the time. Despot then following up with 22%, and finally Commander with 7%. So kind of similar, but a little bit more scrunched because the Charismatic definitely had the most rounds per times played out of everybody. And now on to the thing I find the most interesting is turmoils versus wins. So the way I kind of split this up was asking the question twice is, did we turmoil? Yes or no? And then after finding the turmoils, did we win? Yes or no? With the wins being color coded. So if we look at turmoil, did we turmoil? Yes. Did we win? Yes. There's a big fat 0. No one turmoiled and won in the same game, and I'm a little sad about this. I would love to see a strategy that maybe utilizes turmoiling so we can really efficiently take advantage of those leaders, because they all bring something new and interesting to the table, but to get them, you do have to wipe out your decree, which is pretty difficult to go from maybe a decree of 10 cards, 10 actions to 2. Not exactly the easiest of shifts. Now, one thing I've noticed lately is there is a tendency towards just the one leader, stay strong, non-turmoilable strat. And I really want to see somebody challenge that. I want to see somebody turmoil on purpose. I feel like a lot of times when we turmoil, we're kind of caught off guard. I definitely seen some people turmoil on their own terms, but it's because they were going to turmoil anyway, or they were going to turmoil the next turn. And so I I'm very curious to see what would happen if people had the mental shift to say, I'm going to turmoil this game. And I'm very curious if anyone turmoiled and won at RootCon. Like, if you know anyone who did, or if you're someone who did do that, like, leave a comment in the chat below. Like, I really do want to know these things because I find it absolutely fascinating. So then if we look at the turmoil, yes, and didn't win, we have 15 games that fit into that category. When we look at the turmoiling, no turmoiling section, we had 10 games where we didn't turmoil, but we did win. And that's the 10 games that make up our 26% win rate. And then we have 13 games where we didn't turmoil and we didn't win. So not turmoiling isn't an infallible strategy. I mean, obviously we don't have a 100% win rate. So, but when it comes to when it's not, did they turmoil or not? That is not the deciding factor. Although turmoiling does seem to be an inhibiting factor. But not turmoiling is not an automatic win. That's obviously not the right conditions. So something to think about. If you like what you're seeing, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video below, and of course, leave a comment if you like the video itself, or if you want to see more content like this. I'm very curious because this is a new format I'm trying out, and I'm hoping people are enjoying it. So take care, and I will catch you next time.